Here with Dina Colman, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about tonight's author before we get started with our question session. Dina brings a message of how to live a very health-centered life. Dina starts her story out as a successful young woman who has achieved a master's degree in business, and she's working as a marketing manager for Hewlett-Packard. She's 30 years old, and life is really good, very good. Then she gets a phone call, and it kind of changes everything. And that phone call leads her down a path that she starts to search for some clarity about some questions. And we're going to talk about the phone call and how that led up to this. But basically, it ultimately results in her writing this book that we're going to talk about tonight, Quadrant Living. Making healthy living your new way of life. A few other things to tell you about this book. It is one of the top Amazon 100 books. Just was published in October, so that's quite an achievement. The foreword for the book was written by the same fellow who wrote What Color is Your Parachute? I think most of us in here have probably read that. And you said he's a Danville resident.
He is, 86 years old, Dick Bowles.
So that's pretty neat. This book has also received the San Francisco Book Review gave it a 5-star review. So very impressive start for your new book.
Thank you.
I would like to start by having you tell us about that phone call and how it changed your life in terms of your career, your education, and with the path that it led you on to.
Okay. So the phone call was from my sister, and as Ruth mentioned, this was when I was 30, so it was 15 years ago. And she was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. It was very aggressive cancer. And she went through some aggressive treatment, stem cell transplant, double mastectomy, radiation, and so at the time, because it turns out doctors were very interested because she was so young and the cancer was so aggressive, they wanted to know if there was a history in my family. And it turns out that there was. 9 relatives on my mother's side had breast cancer. And so doctors told me that I had an 87% chance of getting breast cancer in my lifetime. I was told this at age 30. And they advised me to take some toxic medications and preventative surgeries. And in the beginning, I definitely was paralyzed by fear. I was worried for my sister that I was going to lose my sister, and I was worried for myself, is cancer my destiny too? And that was the nature of the phone call. I would say as I mentioned, for the next year or so while I was watching my sister go through treatment, I was in a place of fear. I worried about every food that I was eating, but it wasn't healthy living because it was coming from this place of fear. And over the next 10 years, I still continued on working in the corporate world, but always in the back of my mind was this question of, is cancer my destiny? And finally, 6 years ago, I decided to find out and learn more. And I left the corporate world and I went back to school to study holistic health education at JFK University in Pleasant Hill, got my master's degree. And there I learned about the science of epigenetics, which changed my life. And the science of epigenetics tells us that our genes are not our destiny. Scientists, am I talking too much on this one question? It was a big question.
It was a big question.
It kind of lays the groundwork. Scientists used to believe that it was our genotype, which is our DNA, that determined our health. And now they realize that it is our phenotype, which is our genotype, DNA, plus the environment. And by environment, we mean diet, stress, exercise, emotions. And so this was very empowering for me. I went from this place of fear to, I'm going to choose to give myself the best chance for health and live healthy. And so that's the journey that I've been on. I have a client practice now in Danville where I help people live healthy lives. I wrote my book, For Quadrant Living, founded my company, For Quadrant Living.
Great. Neat way to take a very potentially tragic story and lead you down. It sounds like, well, I know from reading your book that you've been able to really incorporate a much very positive outlook on your health and your life in general. And it's very interesting. I really enjoyed the way you take the 4 quadrants and tie those together to create this whole that does become this health.
Yes.
And so I'd like to take a minute, or let's maybe move now into talking about each of these quadrants, and then we can sort of work into how they integrate with each other. So starting, I guess, with mind, as the book does.
So the 4 quadrants are mind, body, relationships, and environment. And in this country, we focus a lot on the body quadrant when we think of health. So that might be surgery or medication, or on a good day that means diet and exercise. But that's a very limiting view of health and only tells 1/4 of the story. There's 3 other very important quadrants for our health. So mind, I think people understand that stress is bad for our health, but don't really understand what's happening physiologically and that it does manifest in disease. 45% of adults suffer adverse health effects due to stress, and 75% of doctor visits are for stress-related complaints. So stress is very real, manifests itself in high blood pressure, heart disease, many health concerns. So the mind quadrant is about how to reduce our stress, and there's 2 different ways you can look at it. One would be coping strategies. So this might be reframing a situation. It could be time management or financial planning. That would be a coping strategy. And the other piece of it would be relaxation techniques. So maybe it's meditation or breathing. Just both ways can help reduce and lower stress. Should I just continue through the quadrants?
Well, one thing I wanted to say while we were talking about that, the meditation, you know, in your book, you talk about meditation and you describe your own experience with it, that, you know, how do you really do this? Am I doing it? I think the way you wrote about it, it made it more real. And in other words, how do you really quiet your mind? I mean, there's always so much going on there. And so maybe you could just talk a minute about that, because I think most of us think, oh, it would be great to meditate, but I really can't, you know, sit still that long or whatever.
And it's great that you bring this up, because actually that's the chapter that I hear most from readers that resonates with them. The chapter is called Meditation with Hollywood, and Hollywood is my cat. And I talk about how meditation has been on my to-do list for 15 years. I'm a type A, and I always know, yes, I should meditate. I've got books in the bookshelf, and meditation just doesn't happen. And I've tried over the years, you know, sitting in the position, and it's always uncomfortable, and my mind's wandering. And one morning, I was laying in bed, which I do every morning, and my cat Hollywood was sitting on my chest, and I was just feeling the vibration of him purring, and I was just thinking about nothing but feeling him and listening to him, and my mind was free, and a light bulb went on. This is meditation. It doesn't have to be, for some people the traditional form works, and that's great, but for other people it doesn't. It could be gardening, it could be listening to music, it could be sitting at the beach. Whatever your meditation is, but that is the chapter that I hear about the most, that people really resonated with. I think because a lot of people feel that with their pets too.
Yeah, pets, I think, bring that up. But I just really, it was nice to have someone say, oh, it's very hard. You know, it's not as easy as just sitting there and clearing your mind. So I like the technique of having something else that you could focus on, that is just sitting there being warm and cuddly with you. So. Yeah, so let's move on now to
Okay,
the next
sure.
Yeah.
We'll talk about the body quadrant. So the body quadrant, it's what we're most familiar with when we think in terms of health. Obviously, nutrition is a key piece of it. Exercise is a key piece, but also getting enough sleep. There is a chapter about taking prescription drugs mindfully. There's many hospitalizations, 2 million hospitalizations a year and 100,000 deaths every year from prescription drug adverse side effects. And so it's not about not taking them, it's just about taking them mindfully and doing the research and being very aware when you're taking them to see if any of the feelings that you're having could be related to the medication, because a lot of times we don't know. Anything specific about
okay, so, I mean, I just made some notes about some of the things that I really related to as I was reading that section. And one, I made a note about Gypsy.
Yes.
Because that really rang true for me. Gypsy's her cruiser, and she writes about how she likes to get on Gypsy, and you know that is an exercise that is, she just enjoys it. She doesn't even have to think about it as really a workout. And I certainly feel that way. I love to ride my bike, and it just gives me that feeling inside like I'm a kid again, especially, you know, zooming down a hill or something. So I thought that was really a very, that's a neat point, that exercise doesn't have to be just hard work.
Yes.
It can be fun, and you kind of put a bit of fun in a lot of what you're trying to get people to.
And that is one of my favorite chapters. I was thinking on the way here, I mean, of course, they're all my babies, so I love all 48 chapters. But I was thinking if I had to pull one out from each from the body quadrant, it probably is Find Your Gypsy. And it really is, again, about we feel like we know we should exercise. Exercise is good for us, right? And how, you know, we hear about when we should do 3 days of cardio and we should be doing weights, and we feel guilty and like failures when we don't, and sometimes it feels like a chore. And so it's just about finding the fun in exercise, and that exercise and fun don't have to be mutually exclusive, and they shouldn't be if you wanted to make it a healthy way of life. And so it is about, it can be, my husband is right there the side of the room, and he just took up pogo sticking. He jumps on a pogo stick around our neighborhood. He's up to 50 minutes on the pogo stick. It could be hopscotch. It could be playing basketball. You know, it doesn't matter what it is, just thinking outside the box. Even if it is going to the gym, maybe it's doing something so that you look forward to going to the gym. Like I remember when I was into Law and Order, and so I would time it around, I'm going to watch Law and Order when I'm on the elliptical. Or maybe it's like downloading certain tunes that you just play at the gym, or meeting a friend, getting a pedometer. These are all some of the ideas in the book. I think pedometers are a great motivator. And you want to try to get 7,000 to 10,000 steps a day, but if you look at your pedometer and it's 5 o'clock and you're at 6,000, maybe you'll be motivated to walk around the block a few more times. So it is about finding the fun in exercise.
The other thing you talk about is the 80-20 eating rule, which I think that's also a very practical approach. Maybe you could share that with
Sure, yeah. There's a term called orthorexic, which is the unhealthy obsession with healthy eating. And so sometimes when we learn about nutrition, right, we go a little crazy and we worry about everything we're eating. But that can be unhealthy. And so the 80-20 rule is about eating healthy 80% of the time, and 20% maybe you're indulging in the foods that you love, but you're doing it mindfully and you're doing it without guilt. So it's when it becomes mindless and you're doing it, or maybe it's emotional, or it's getting more than the 20%, creeping up into the 50%, that's when we need to make some changes. But it's all about balance and having fun, and just remembering that a part of health is pleasure. And so if you enjoy sharing foods with others and you're at a family gathering, you don't want to have to be restrictive and say, I can't have that, if that's taking away from the fun enjoyment of being together. So
Yeah, I related to that. It was my birthday while I was reading this. So, you know, we're out to dinner. They bring 3 or 4 desserts. It was great. I was just doing my 20%.
Exactly.
So I totally enjoyed it. Let's see, the other thing, I guess, yeah, I thought that was good. I lost my train of thought, but there was something else about just the whole exercise eating. I felt like you just put it into a context that people really can live with this. You know, I think anything you do that's too rigid, it becomes unpleasant. And I think the idea, the concept of keeping it something fun.
Yes.
Really pretty
And
important.
the subtitle of the book is Making Healthy Living Your New Way of Life. And so the chapters are about what can be doable. A lot of times in this country, people go on different diets, and they're fad diets, or they're just so restrictive diets, and maybe you lose the weight that you want to lose, but then you gain it back because it's not sustainable. And so the ideas are about creating a new way of life. You're not on a diet. This is your dietary way of life now. And so there's just ideas about keeping it simple. You know, you're hearing about eating whole foods. That's really important, a good rule to go by whenever you can, eating whole foods. When you are doing packaged goods, really reading the labels. A lot of times people focus on the numbers, like the fat and the carbs. But for me, I look at the ingredient list. I don't even look at the numbers, because you could look at almond butter, and you could look at, has anybody heard of better and peanut butter? It's called better and peanut butter. It's like a faux peanut butter. But if you look at the stats, there's like 2 grams of fat on the faux peanut butter, and maybe 16 grams of fat on almond butter. So you might think, oh, I should choose this option. But when you look at the ingredients of almond butter, the ingredients are roasted almonds. That's it. Maybe sometimes salt. On the better and peanut butter, peanuts aren't even the first, and then it's like 10 other ingredients that you've never heard of, and when there are things you can't pronounce, it means it's not a real food. And so it's all about eating real foods, because what happens is you eat these other foods, you're not satisfied. There's nothing, it's a myth that eating fat causes fat. It's eating healthy fats, it fills you up so you're unlikely to reach for other food later. So there's information about them. I'm big about just real foods and reading ingredients on everything, not just, that's another chapter that is about products that you put on your body. So we're very mindful about the food that we eat, but we also have to look at what are the shampoos that we use and the toothpaste, and we use on average 9 products a day on our body. And when we eat, the food goes through our liver to detoxify, but the products that we use don't have that luxury, and they go quicker into the bloodstream. So it is just being mindful about that too, and again, reading the ingredients. So there's ideas about what are some of the key ingredients not to that you don't want your products to have, and then what are some ways to have more natural products. I'm passionate about this, in case you could.
Let's talk about relationships, and maybe tell us a little bit about your philosophy in that quadrant.
Okay. So relationships, we focus on, okay, now we're good about what we're eating and exercising, but a lot of times we don't pay attention or think about affecting on our health is who we're surrounding ourselves with. But our relationships can be toxic. And research shows that people that have a strong social support network live longer than those people without support. And there's other studies that show that people that have had cancer have less chance of reoccurrence if they're in a support group. So it's important to remove people that don't make you feel good about yourself. The test that I do is after you've spent time with someone, you know that there are people that you leave that activity or moment with them and you're like, I just don't feel very good about myself right now, right? Can anybody relate to that? Yeah. Maybe they're self-absorbed. Maybe they're belittle you. Maybe they are just draining. Maybe they're negative, whatever it is. And then on the other hand, there's people that you spend time with and you feel great. You feel loved. You feel amazing and beautiful, and they just build you up. And so it's just about doing the relationship test and really actively managing your relationships. And it can be hard and it takes work, but you should, do it for your health as much as you can, really nurturing the relationships that make you feel good and trying to minimize those that don't.
You talk about triggers and the power that they can have when you're involved in a relationship. And I would imagine that those can be things from your past even, that now someone you're relating to in a more current situation trigger. And so obviously that would want to be avoided. I liked your discussion about vitamin T. That's a really nice one. That was vitamin T for touch, just how ways to keep the level of touch high in your life.
Yes.
We're not, well, some of us aren't very touchy, some of us are. So, but you never know if the person you're touching, do they really want you to touch? And so you do always feel a little bit of a struggle about that. And then find your people, talk about that. I think that's a really good strategy.
Well, all of the chapters that you mentioned so far, trigger happy, she mentioned about triggers, and that trigger happy was one of the chapters in relationship. I thought, yeah, that one, I think people can really relate to that because it is about the baggage that we bring from our past relationships into our present relationships, and when you're not aware of it, it impacts. So I give the example of, there's different triggers that I talk about. There's abandonment triggers, there's deprivation triggers, so we all have our different things. I have abandonment triggers. So even when we're in Costco, I'm in Costco with my husband, and if he goes elsewhere and I have no idea where he is, I am really upset by it. And I have a client who feels the same way when her husband does that to her, and we both have abandonment triggers. And if we weren't aware of it, right, which there have been instances where you're triggered, and so my husband Dave bears the brunt of it before I can realize, wait a minute, that wasn't about him. That was about what I bring from my past. And so, it's just about being mindful of that so that we can have healthier and more positive relationships. So find your people. You asked me about find your people.
I like that.
Yeah. Find your people is, you know who your people are, right? I mean, for me, it's fellow runners. It's fellow pet animal lovers. I'm a big animal lover, and that's where the chapter begins. Is I was at a vet's office in Walnut Creek at 9 o'clock at night. From 9 to 11 I was there. They're open till midnight. And this was one day I was thinking about adopting a dog, so I was going to see the dog there. And as I was waiting, people were coming in and out, these rescue organizations. That's kind of, I guess, the time that they come in, and they had just rescued dogs and, were being spayed and neutered. And I thought, wow, people are here at 10 o'clock at night, volunteering, spending their time. A lot of people might think, this is weird, who are these people? But to me, I thought, these are my people. I get it. I have that same love of animals that they do. And so it is about finding your people. I have a friend, Doug, who loves food. He's a total foodie. And I'll say, oh, what did you have for dinner last night? And he'll go on and on and on about the salmon and how it was made. That's not my people. But I imagine that for people that love food and cooking, and somebody that was his people would have known exactly what he was talking about, could replicate the recipe, right? All I heard was salmon and asparagus. That's all I needed to know. I didn't need to know how it was cooked. So it is just about finding your people, recognizing that, spending time with them.
I think the idea of finding it through volunteering also, at least I know the age group that I'm in, my kids are out of school, the connections that I made in the community aren't the same anymore. And so I think that can be a time when some people feel a little bit isolated, their connections have sort of broken apart because of the change in the life place that you're at. So, to me, I sort of read into that volunteering is a great way to connect with people. So I do believe that I like that a lot.
And the one other thing I want to say about that is being true to yourself, and that is a big message in the book, and I'm a big believer of it. There's a chapter in the Mind Quadrant called Free to Be Me, and it's all about living authentically, and it took me 40 years to get there and figure that out and just say, this is who I am, and that's great if you like me, and if you don't, this is who I am, and not trying to be what you think society wants you to be, your people want you to be. And so find your people ties into that, because those people who really get you, right? I mean, like I said, I'm a runner. My family doesn't understand running, and every time I'm visiting home, I have to like sneak in my runs and get up early and change my clothes before they know I run. And so it's just about, trying to be authentic with that and being with the people that get it. You don't have to explain it. They understand you.
That definitely is a very rich experience. The other thing about relationships, I don't want to dwell on it too long, but I loved the Freaky Friday example. So talk about that for a little bit. It's a very vivid way to explain that concept.
Yes, the Freaky Friday example is, it's an exercise about if you have somebody in your life that it's a difficult relationship. And so it's 3, 2, 1. The 3 is talk to it, the 2 is face it, and then the 1 is be it. And so it walks you through this exercise, which I did as I was writing the chapter. I have kind of a strained relationship with my sister-in-law. And I was wondering, how is she going to feel if she reads the book? But I don't think she read the book, which is part of having a strained relationship, so I'm okay. But I mean, it's not negative. It's just, a good exercise for doing it. It was actually really therapeutic for me. So the 3, talk to it. The exercise is just describe the situation that you're having with the person. So, and you're talking about it in the 3rd person. And then the second one is, talk to it, and that is, you can do this, you should do it in a journal. I mean, you can do it in your head, but it's probably better written. And you just write out, having a dialogue. I say, gosh, I feel like our relationship, blah, 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 and they respond, well, but and so you have this dialogue. And then the 1 is be it, where you try to take their perspective and you say, I am, and you read the sentence back that you've written, applying it to yourself. So when you first wrote it, you're doing it kind of in their mindset, and then you read it from, well, what would it be like if I said that? And I know I'm not explaining it very well, but it details it out, and it's really powerful. It was for me. When I finished writing the chapter, I was really tempted to call my sister-in-law and just say, did I capture your feelings accurately? But the more I sat with it, I felt like I was at peace with it, and I kind of let it go, and so it's a good exercise.
Just putting yourself in someone else's shoes in a really clever way, I felt. Because there's nothing like trying to figure out what that other person is thinking.
Yeah.
Which we just make assumptions, and that's probably why those relationships end up being so strained. Okay, let's talk about the environment aspect.
Yeah. The environment quadrant is probably the one that people think least relates to their health, and I feel like gets the least amount of love. Not by me, but like if I write a blog, sometimes I feel like the environment one I don't get as many comments, or people don't read it as much. But the environment is definitely a part of our health. The World Health Organization estimates that 25% of our health problems are from environment. And scientists estimate that 100 potentially dangerous industrial chemicals and pollutants are in the body of the average American. So, and we think it's separate from us somehow, and we spray our foods with pesticide, and we drive cars that produce pollution, which is bad for the environment's health, but we then eat these food and breathe the polluted air, which is bad for our health. So it really is about understanding the connection between the environment's health and our health. And there's chapters both on how to reduce your carbon footprint, which helps the environment, which helps us. Also about how to detoxify your home and environment in ways that you can. Obviously, there's global things that we may not have as much control over, but there are things that we can do in our own environment. And then the other piece of the environment is the health that we get from being outside. And there's research that shows that being outside reduces our stress, promotes self-esteem, and so it is about, there's a chapter about my love affair with a mountain. It's the last chapter of the book, which is Mount Diablo, and just about the health and the solace and how it helps us reduce our stress. So just recognizing that and being outdoors when we can, and being in our spots that, it's different for all of us. Maybe it's the ocean or the beach or your own backyard, whatever it is.
The other thing you talk about regarding the environment that we have some control over is clutter.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciated what you had written. In my family, I'm pretty sparse, but I grew up with a family. My parents both collect antiques, and they just have so much stuff. It's unbelievable. And it just feels like so much to manage. They love it, and it's what they do, but so I have this thing about clutter. And I thought your comments about how that's something we can have some control over. But how do you help, say, a person who is very sentimental about things? I mean, people do get very strong feelings about their things. How do you encourage that?
So this is the chapter, Free Space, Free Mind. And I am a big proponent of when you have a cluttered space, you have a cluttered mind. And anytime you clean out, it's therapeutic and it's refreshing. I just did it recently, went through my file drawer, and I keep a pretty, tight ship on things, but we just did it this weekend. Just one file drawer, I had 2 bags of recycle and 2 recycle bin stuff of paperwork. So we all have stuff that we, can remove. If it's sentimental, there's a lot of things that we keep that aren't sentimental. Some people, I know I had a friend that had the newspaper from stacked up this high from weeks and months. And so things like that you can get rid of. Sentimental, it would probably just be helping the person understand that you can still love the person, but not necessarily keep everything, and maybe it's choosing, or maybe it's storing it somewhere, or maybe it's taking a piece of it. But there are a lot of ideas that I think a lot of it is not necessarily sentimental stuff.
Just attachment.
Yeah, it's just
attachment gone wild.
Yeah.
And you talked a bit about the holiday madness, and I think that all of us can relate to that, and how to minimize the clutter and just the excess around that.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that a bit, share some ideas. It doesn't seem like it was all that long ago. We put our things away.
Yeah, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but it is pretty crazy, the spending and waste that we do on the holidays. And so I do talk about, saying I'm not a total Grinch, but, I think there are changes that we can all make. But let's see, household waste in the U.S. increases by more than 25% from Thanksgiving to New Year's Day. So we have, let's see, this adds up to 1 million tons a week to our landfills during this time. And so the chapter just gives ideas about maybe limiting the holiday cards that you do to people that you don't see all the time, or maybe sending electronic cards. You can rent Christmas trees, or get a potted tree. Trying homemade gifts. This was big with my family. They kind of hesitated at first and was like, we don't want to do that. But it's been so fun just picking one person's name and making a homemade gift. And I remember every single gift. We've done it for 5 years. Every gift that I've gotten from a family member, I can't tell you the product gifts that I've gotten. And those are something that I am sentimental. I'm not going to get rid of those. And just about giving less, we've gotten into this where we feel we have to give to so many people, but really thinking about it, and sometimes even just saying, if you're exchanging with friends or family, and saying, do we want to do this, or can we just pick one name, or maybe we can make it an experience, let's have a date together instead of a gift. And sometimes even though it's the way you've been doing it, it takes the burden off of them too, because a lot of people are feeling the same way. During the holidays, there's just so much frenzy. I gotta get my gifts, I gotta do this, and it takes away from the joy, and not good for your health. So there's just ideas about how to make it a little less stressful during the holiday time. Still making it special. Absolutely, you could still make it special, have some traditions. Maybe it's building a gingerbread house, or doing puzzles, or whatever, seeing the Christmas lights. It doesn't have to be just about the product.
And then lastly, on the environment, talk about the vinegar and soda, please.
The vinegar and soda, so that's about, I talked about the natural products using on your body, then it's also about the environment. Okay, what are the cleaning products that you're using in your home? Because that impacts what you're breathing, what may be getting into your body. And so vinegar and baking soda are great cleaning. I have just a little spray bottle that's half vinegar and half water, and that's my Windex. That is my mirrors and my windows. It's great. And then the baking soda is kind of my Comet. So I'll just put that in my sink, on the counters, just have a wet sponge. And you don't have to have all of the toxic products. You can go natural.
And they do work really well.
They do work, yeah.
So we've covered the 4 quadrants now, and maybe you could talk a bit about how they interrelate and just the importance, how you need really all of them.
Yeah, definitely. They absolutely, even though they're talked about separately in every given moment, we are all 4 quadrants. And I think the important thing to remember, and there's a chapter called The Mental and Illness in the Mind Quadrant, and I had a client who was physically in a lot of pain. She had several surgeries, and she definitely had physical pain. But that was in the body quadrant. But she let it carry over into the other 3 quadrants. In the mind, she got very down about it. She called herself an invalid. In the relationships, all of her relationships, whenever she had a conversation, all she would talk about was her pain. And when I would ask her, she would go to, I gave the example, she would go to a ball game, and I would say, how was that? Oh, well, sitting for so long, and it was very painful. Instead of, it was a great game, I enjoyed it, so-and-so won. In the environment quadrant, I said, maybe you could just try sitting outside, which was from here, to there. Well, going down the 2 steps, it's too painful. And which, okay, if that's the case, then maybe it's just looking out the window and appreciating nature. But she let her physical impact all of the other 3 quadrants, and so she wasn't healthy. But she could have still been healthy even with her physical pain, which she did get there and worked on little by little. So maybe it's, I said, okay, for the next week, when you have any conversation in a relationship and somebody asks you how you're doing, say you're doing well, because it could be you're doing well because you're mentally feeling better, your relationships. You don't have to be unhealthy just because you have something in one quadrant. And I think that's powerful because you can help yourself by saying, okay, so what can I do? Yes, I have this physical pain, but what can I do? What do I have control over in the mind? Well, maybe I can't, maybe I feel like I'm an invalid, but let me change my mantra about it. I'm grateful that I can still move around. I'm, better day by day. Maybe in your body quadrant, she was a runner, but maybe there's other things that you can do, or maybe it's new activities, or, cooking was hard, but maybe it's bringing a friend over and letting them, helping, giving the direction to them, cooking, you're spending time together. So it really is just empowering to realize what are the areas of my life that I do have control over and can have health, even if I'm not feeling well.
So that talks about, just in a relationship, which obviously is important. I think even if you do, let's say you have healthy relationships, but the environment you're living in isn't good for whatever reasons, that, the need to take care of the environment will improve, the other areas. So you can really, if you start thinking down that line, you can really see how these things do interweave very closely. So the other thing, which is not really a part of your book, but you do have a private practice, and so I'm just sort of curious what it's like to, what kind of service do you provide your clients? Maybe you could describe a little bit of that process, how you go about helping someone.
Okay, yeah. I help clients on a wide variety of topics. A lot of times people will come in from the nutrition angle, but a lot of times it's from stress or relationships. A lot of times they may come in from nutrition, but then it's always related. You know, we dig into, okay, well, why are you having the eating? And then it could be stress, it could be, other things that are going on. So I do help clients on a wide variety of topics. Sometimes people come in because they have a certain health concern. Autoimmune disease is a tough disease that's not helped very well in the medical environment, but can be helped very well with changes in diet and lifestyle. So it could be somebody that has a health problem, or it's just somebody that wants to learn to eat better or just live healthier. So it's varied, which is great. I love helping people. It fills my soul, and I'm definitely on the path that I am meant to be on, and leaving the corporate world behind. And every day when I go to the office and help people, I know it's what I should be doing.
I wanted to give the audience an opportunity if there were any questions. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask Dina? If not, I'm sure I can come up with more. Yes.
I would like to say thank you for coming. I love your enthusiasm about what you're talking about. It makes all of us feel interested and enthusiastic about it too. And I'm sorry we didn't have a better turnout. This is such a good program. I wish we filled the auditorium every time we had anybody. But you left out, and maybe it's elsewhere in your book, but you didn't talk about tonight, the best thing in the world for relieving stress in your life is to retire. It makes a world of difference in your life.
Well, here's to retirement.
Yes, I like that.
Yes.
And you know what, but that does bring up a good point, because some people maybe they're not at retirement yet, but we always have choices. And so it is living our life even while we're working, but trying to make sure we're doing the things that we love and making time for it, and actively. There is a chapter called Creating Your Masterpiece. It's chapter 1, because I think it's very important. And it is about, we are the creators of our lives, and a lot of times we just go on autopilot, and we just think we should be doing, or we're doing, and we're not actively thinking about, is this the way I want to live my life, which we have more time to do in retirement, but I think it's important to do at all stages of our life. And thank you for your comment, and I think it's a great, I'm happy with the turnout, and I appreciate everybody coming, so it doesn't matter how many people are here. Yes?
I was wondering, in your book, obviously I haven't read it yet, so, but do you address in your book, if you're, as an individual, working on your quadrants, for example, but let's say you're married, and that person, their consciousness is not there, and it's not something they're really interested in working on, do you talk about that? Like if you're in an environment where, for whatever reason, you're going to be in that environment, that ways to approach that and how to thrive in it, even if you're...
Yeah, I can't think of a place where I would address that, but I think it's even related to when I think about, two people can be faced with the same stressful event and react differently, which means that we have the power to manage our stress. And so I feel like in a similar situation, you're doing what you can do, and you're in this situation. It would be great if the person was on this journey, or, but it's about how you react to it. So this is the reality of where he's at, or this person's at, and then it's what can I do about, how can I interact with that? What changes can I make? Because I can control that. I can't control what happens here. I can try, it's not going to work. But I can control what I do and how I react to that.
And don't you find that by improving your own reaction to things, that kind of makes that other person's reaction can also improve? So I can see where that technique could, it might work. If you were to try the question.
Do you have a suggestion, if you have, let's say, a family member who pushes all your buttons, triggers all the toxic person for you. But clearly, this person has to be in your life. Suggestions for how you handle that?
Yeah, definitely do the 3-2-1 exercise.
I wrote it down.
Freaky Friday chapter, which will help. But yes, the reality is that you're still going to be in contact with the person. But definitely trying to minimize as much as you can. Maybe recognizing is there any piece of that is triggering from the past that you can own. But then of course there is just the person, it could be trying to get your frustration out another way, like maybe journaling is always good. Just when you're in that situation, who else is around that you can talk to instead of that person? I think being mindful of how you're feeling, so that's part of the triggering, is when you're feeling that, it's okay, I'm feeling that, and maybe trying to take an objective, which they talk a lot about in Buddhism, is how to be like the third-party observer. So maybe it's like, oh, I'm at this family event and I feel myself getting angry because so-and-so is bugging me again. And so it's removing yourself from that emotion. So there's different exercise that could be helpful.
I think today our environments are sometimes too frequently invaded by leaf blowers. And I find that particular noise menacing somehow. And so I leave the neighborhood because every day there's somebody with their own leaf blower and there's no schedule,
Yeah.
And so I go to the shopping center or something like that to get away from it. And there's another leaf blower.
Go to the gym.
Maybe you have a suggestion on how I could stop my reaction to
Yeah.
it?
Well, and you know what? There is a paragraph in here, I don't remember which chapter, but it is in the environment quadrant that says noise, that noise is absolutely can affect our health.
Never ended.
Yeah, I love earplugs. I wear earplugs a lot, even in my house. Well, I wear them every night when I sleep. But if I really need to concentrate or if something's loud, so I would say earplugs. And yeah, so as far as, that's a good question, so how can you change your reaction to it? Could be, finding a relaxation method that works. So there's some ideas in here about breathing or, meditation, or maybe it's relaxing music that you're cranking up to blow out the leaf blowers. But it could just be, okay, I hear the leaf blowers and it could be like a good challenge, right? Let me do some deep breathing. I mean, the power of the breath is amazing. I do heart math with my clients, which is a biofeedback tool, and I'll take 2 minutes and say, tell me what stress you're having. And then I'll take 2 minutes where I'll do just a relaxation exercise. And they're hooked up to a computer that has software that's measuring their heart rate variability. And you can see the physiological changes that are going on in your body. It's incredible, from just when they're talking about the stress to when we do a 2-minute breathing exercise. So it could be when you're hearing that leaf blower, you are having a physiological reaction if it's, bugging you. And so it is important to try to change that, but you can. You can do it by breathing, by doing something that's nurturing for you. Put those earplugs in, they work. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I think you had, did you post
I did,
to
yes.
share with us before we close?
Yes.
So, one more thing from us, and then the books are for sale over here, and I know Dina would be very happy to autograph a book. And having just finished it, I found it really a great read, and it's organized to be a nice reference that you can go back through and follow. So,
And 10% of the sales will go to the Friends of Library.
yes, thank you for that.
You're
We always
welcome.
appreciate that.
Of course. So I just wanted to read you a quote that I like, and a lot of readers, it seems to resonate. So it's the last paragraph in my acknowledgement section. Here is what I know for sure. We are the creators of our own lives. Actively and passionately choose the life you want. Seek out meaning, be happy, appreciate life, live mindfully, be authentic, share the journey with others, and walk softly on this earth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And thank all of you for coming. We really appreciate your spending the evening with us. And we also always appreciate your keeping the Friends and the Foundation and the Library in your hearts and your donation ideas. Thank you so much.